Dr. Shastri, you can share the slides now.
Thank you, sir.
Dr. Srijan, you can introduce and
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Santosh sir. Very good evening to Shastri sir and all listening on this channel. Adar sir, Babu sir, Rajan sir, Santosh sir, and all the seniors. In the actually, we thought of skipping the last 2 weeks of December. We were having a wonderful national conference at Visakhapatnam. And after that, actually, we thought we'll skip, but I called Shastri sir last week. In spite of this very short notice, sir has agreed to spare some time to us today. Sir is a distinguished figure in the field of surgery and is renowned for his expertise and contributions. He is a pioneer in thoracoscopic and laparoscopic surgeries. Dr. Shastri has significantly advanced his surgical techniques and outcomes. His exceptional dedication to education is evidenced by his role as an esteemed teacher and as an overseas tutor for the Royal College of Surgeons of Edinburgh. Dr. Shastri's prowess is underscored by his receipt of several gold medals from the University of Mumbai, reflecting his exceptional scholarly achievements. Furthermore, his influential leadership as a regional director, Asia Pacific at Johnson & Johnson, and his role as a consultant medical director demonstrate a significant impact on the medical community. Dr. Shastri's commitment to knowledge dissemination is evident through the numerous training programs he has conducted across India, empowering aspiring surgical professionals with invaluable expertise. I had the fortune to listen to his several classes on sutures, energy, science of tissue management, and vascular anastomosis. And long ago, he came to Calicut and taught the postgraduates of Calicut Medical College also. Having also enriched his professional experience through an extensive tenure in Korea spanning almost for 3 years, Dr. Shastri's global perspective and expertise have undoubtedly left a mark in the field of surgery. Today, we are going to listen an interesting topic, and he's going to throw light on probably a different topic. On behalf of the ASI Kerala chapter, I welcome Dr. Shastri for his speech, and I thank you profusely for accepting our invitation and for sparing some time with the surgeons of Kerala. Thank you, sir. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. Just want to confirm that my screen is visible to all.
Yes, sir.
It is. So today I'm going to give a slightly different topic. The title of the topic is drink, and it's a user's manual. And in medical terms, we know it as instructions for use. So I've tried to label it much as we study anything in medicine, which is etiology and presentation and side effects and contraindications in the language that we understand. Of course, this is my perspective. I'm not going to I'm trying to make it a humorous talk rather than something which is factual. It's just my view on how this has progressed over many hundreds of thousands of years and where we are today. And also some catchphrases, because many of us like to feel nice and like to feel sophisticated when we're holding a drink in our hand. And we need to know the right words to use, particularly if you're drinking wine or you're drinking a very good whiskey or drinking very good alcohol of any kind. So it has always puzzled me to know what came first. This is the etiology. Did bread, chapati, roti, or rice, or anything made out of rice like idli and dosa come first? Or was the grain used for something else? So I tried to throw myself back 250,000 years. 250,000 years ago, the yield on each stalk of grain was very, very poor. Today, you get about 100, 200 grains per stalk in high yield varieties. in those days, 200,000 years ago, when everything was done by hand, you may have 10 grains on one stalk, and then to protect it from rodents and other pests, to be able to harvest it, to be able to store it, and then be able to dehusk it, and then make it into some kind of flour, and then make it into bread or a roti or a paratha. I mean, it seems to me mind boggling. And I don't know if people were harvesting grain at that time to actually make bread to eat. Perhaps they were doing it for something else. So I tried to look at a few other things that were around about 200 or 250,000 years ago. The first is that human beings changed from being nomadic to becoming agriculturalists around that time. And when we were nomadic, perhaps, small groups of 20 or 30 moved from place to place without contaminating the environment. But the minute humans settled down and started doing what we thought was agriculture for food, uh, the ponds, lakes, wells, rivers, where they had settled down, obviously became contaminated, not only from washing, from slaughtering animals or butchering animals, cleaning hides, washing themselves, washing clothes. Oftentimes, cesspits, which were open cesspits in those days, had complete and total access to the water supply that was used for consumption. And for a long time, till probably the 1800s, it was not safe to drink water. You probably got very, very ill if you drank water, and even may have died. And our mortality rates, which changed in the 1900s, probably changed because the piping system for carrying drinking or potable water and the methods of potable water had changed. Boiling water was possible, but as you can well imagine, it may have been so cumbersome because there was no pipe gas, there were no gas cylinders. You had to collect wood and boil water, and nobody really knew the correlation between microbiology and disease. So it was probably easier to cook the grains along with the stalk and along with the husks with water that was available from whichever water source, and let the natural yeasts, which were anyway there in overripe fruits, and animals used to also have it, and probably human beings as well in some rudimentary form of wine, um, and cook these grains into a thick soupy beer with the natural yeasts that were there. And probably, in my thinking, that is how the original grains were used. And then, of course, as agriculture flourished, and over a period of time when agriculture, settlements, drinking water, cesspits, or whatever became deconstructed and became separate from each other, probably that's when it became safer. But till such time as the mid 1800s, when water was difficult, to actually get good drinking water, it was probably safer to have some alcoholic beverage. And I think that's the reason why in the English language, are you in good spirits, meaning are you in good health, probably came in. You are healthier if you drank a little bit of spirit tainted water, which somehow killed the bacteria. Um, Descartes, that's Rene Descartes' painting over there. He made the famous statement, "Cogito ergo sum," which means "I think, therefore I am." So I've sort of labeled this as pre-existing conditions, and human beings always have turned it around into "inebriato ergo sum." I drink, therefore I am. And for generations and hundreds of years, it has been prescribed as a medicine. It's been traded as a commodity. It is even today collected by connoisseurs who won't touch that bottle which is lying in with them or their family for hundreds of years. It has been used in some religious rituals, and in many, many instances, it has had a hand in shaping history. Apparently, Churchill and Stalin, who were sworn enemies, got together to form a front against the Nazi Germans only because both Stalin and Churchill loved to drink. And they apparently sat drinking vodka till the early hours of the morning and struck up such a strong friendship over that one night that it was agreed that the Allies would form a second front at Normandy, and the Soviets would somehow push the Germans back through Poland back into Germany. So it has a lot of pre-existing value, though lots of people have their eyes on it, and I'll come to that a little bit later. What is the pathophysiology? Actually, this is quite interesting, and I did a lot of study on this. I've given this talk before, so it's not unfamiliar with me. Basically, alcohol, somebody has said that reality is an illusion created by the lack of alcohol. But however, we must understand that alcohol is a drug. It's not a stimulant. It's not like caffeine or tannin that is there in tea. It is a drug, and the drug acts in different ways. It's got a biphasic action actually. Not all people exhibit it, but most, 90% or 95% will. It's got a stimulant effect as well as a depressant effect, and that's why it's more of a drug than a stimulant. Actually, contrary to popular belief, if you have a strong shot of alcohol, it shocks the pylorus into shutting very tight, and the intestinal absorption is thus much, much slower. Though there's gastric absorption, the general absorption in the GI tract is less. So initially, it may seem that you can have 3 or 4 shots or 5 shots of absolute undiluted alcohol and nothing happens. But once the pylorus has overcome that shock and it opens up, you will get the full effect of it. And I'll come to that effect shortly. Second, carbonated alcohol, that is, if you have it in the form of having something with bubbles or gas in it, it gets absorbed much, much more quickly because the alcohol disperses itself around those little bubbles and the surface area available is much more. So having, for example, whiskey in soda is a much quicker kick. Having whiskey in water is much less. Having whiskey neat will shock the pylorus into shutting, and maybe 4 or 5 drinks you wouldn't know. But then suddenly after that, when the pylorus opens, you'll have the problem. Two cousin brothers, alcohol and aldehyde dehydrogenase, metabolize the alcohol into breathable stuff that comes out from the air as well as go into the kidneys to be urinated out. It's a very, very, very strong diuretic. So you will get dehydrated quite considerably. And lots of people actually tell me and make this comment that beer is an excellent thirst quencher. Actually, it's not any more a thirst quencher than water because 95% of beer is water. So if you're very thirsty, you're eating a lot of salty stuff, it's a hot day, you sweated a lot, beer initially seems like a great thirst quencher, but water would do a better job, 5% better job. However, later on, if somebody has had too much of beer, it will become a dehydrating agent or a diuretic as well. So alcohol and aldehyde dehydrogenase, there are some ethnic and gender related issues. So females have a less of it. Japanese, Koreans, and the Eastern Chinese have less of it. Bigger people have a little more of it. They've got a bigger liver. Smaller people have a little less of it. But by and large, the numbers that I'll mention below are more or less standard for everybody. It takes some time for alcohol and aldehyde dehydrogenase to work. And that's the last line. In 1 hour, the body can clear only 15 milligrams of alcohol. So if you look at a 30 ml glass of whiskey, it has got about 42% of alcohol in it. That will be roughly around 10 plus or minus 1 or 2 milligrams of alcohol. And the body can clear only 15 per hour, not any faster. So 130 cc drink, which has 20 milligrams of alcohol if it's strong stuff, per 100 ml of blood, that is called blood alcohol concentration, which is what we are measured on the breathalyzer test and our blood test. And I'll tell you a little bit about that. Your body is already falling behind. If you have 2 drinks in an hour, your body is behind by 5 milligrams of alcohol. If you have 3 drinks in an hour, it's behind by 25 milligrams of alcohol. So unfortunately, you have that much more alcohol in the blood. And sadly, your blood alcohol, your breath alcohol is 2,500 times more sensitive to detection than your blood alcohol levels. So you can't fool somebody with your breathalyzer, with a breathalyzer test by saying, I'm going to have some strong coffee. I'm going to brush my teeth. I'll eat some, elaichi or cardamom and, mask my breath. It can't. It is going to be there in your breath and it's going to be there in the bloodstream as well. So a good rule is to wait 20 minutes after you've had 130 cc drink some water in between, and then have your second 30 cc drink, which means your body has got enough of time to catch up to excrete the alcohol. You can't fool the breathalyzer test. they're terms that are used. I've seen it. He can hold his drink. Yes, of course. There are many people. Tolerance is increased, which means you don't get into the stages of alcohol related depression or stimulation or depression as fast as somebody else. But the blood alcohol and the breath alcohol levels will remain the same. Many people have this problem, what, I've got a hangover in the morning. What is the best way? Actually, nothing works. The best way to cure a hangover is not to have a drink the night before. But if you've had 4 large drinks, it's going to take you 20 hours. If you do a rough calculation, it'll take you about 20 hours to clear it. Unless somebody has dialysis, then it will go faster. But that's not a practical solution really to have dialysis. With alcohol, your body loses vitamin B, vitamin C, and many, many nutrients. So over the 20 hours that your body is taking to clear the alcohol, and I'll tell you a little bit, some people use this trick or fake trick actually. Because your body loses so many nutrients and vitamin B and C, it makes good sense to have that stuff over the 20 hours that your body is taking to process the stuff. Eggs have got a lot of vitamins in it, fruit juice, lime juice, olive oil, tomato ketchup, banana. Try everything, but give yourself 20 hours. A second point that I wanted to make is many people think that you're able to have what they call a hair of a dog, or what they call in Maharashtra, at least, they call it utara. That means you get up in the morning with such a bad hangover and you take a little bit more of alcohol and it seems to clear everything up. It's just delaying the inevitable. It's just delaying the inevitable. So what you're doing is bringing in a new batch of stimulation to be able to get you through the first 2 or 3 hours after you've had the stimulant. In English, it's called hair of the dog. That means you're having some alcoholic drink to try to get rid of the hangover. But it pushes back those 20 hours to the next 40 hours. So it's not a good idea to do that. What are the side effects? In medicine, we know. So basically, you get verbose, joculos, morose, lachrymose, and finally comatose. At a blood alcohol concentration of 0.03 to 0.012%, that's about 60 cc, people start loosening up. If there's a feeling of euphoria, the stimulant, start talking more. From 0.09 to 0.25%, that's 120 cc, that's 2 large drinks. The euphoria becomes, even more. You start becoming joculos. You start slapping people on the back. You tell stories and jokes that you would have never told if you had not had 120 cc. Between 0.18, there's some overlap, but that's because some people are less and more. And 0.30, that's 180 cc, there's 3 large drinks. It actually, the euphoria becomes excitement. You start really opening up. And then the second phase, the depressive phase comes in from 0.25 to 4%, which is more than 3 big drinks. You start becoming lachrymose, morose. You may even become bellicose because confusion, depression, and emotion are all mixed together. You'll find people crying over their drink. You'll find people reminiscing about old times. You'll find people meeting long lost friends and saying that, you saved my life, and, because of you, I am where I am. And then, of course, from 0.35% to 0.5% blood alcohol concentration, it's just too much. You'll become comatose. And if there is anything more than 0.5%, the person will die. They actually die of inhalation of their vomit, aspiration and inhalation of their vomit. But sometimes, God is kind. People die of respiratory failure. There's a slight side story I want to tell here. In the Amazonian forest, uh, they drink very strong alcohol, which is actually not matured at all, and it's raw. It's probably 70% or 80%. So when friends get together and it's part of an adult rite of passage, and they drink too much and they fall down. And Amazonians, they probably are naked. They don't wear any clothes even today. The tribes people. So that person is turned upside down, and a large leaf is rolled into a funnel, and it's put into the rectum, and more alcohol is poured into the rectum, this is the what the first sort of people who surveyed that place found. And that's where the term bottoms up comes from, actually. So we say bottoms up. It was basically they were turned with their bottom up and more alcohol, and they probably died because they were in a coma at that time. So side effects of drinking are a lot. It's good for you as well, which I'll come to at the end. But overdoing it, binge drinking, and stuff is not good. It's better to have your shots in 30 cc or more. Now, what are the clinical presentations of alcohol? So all of us, and what are the clever things we have to say when you have the alcohol? That's important as well. Because not only do you want to have a good drink and you want to enjoy with your friends and you want to meet them and catch up and socialize, but we want to seem smart as well. So let me start with beer. There are many names which are given. So let me give you a little bit. The picture on the top is an ale. They're porters, they're stouts, and they're pilsners and lagers. What is an ale? Actually, initially beers were brewed and fermented with no hops added to it. And I'll tell you a little bit about hops as well. So fresh beer that was brewed, there are two type of yeasts. Some yeasts ferment the beer from above below, and some yeasts ferment the beer from below above. They taste different. So a lager beer, for example, is a bottom fermented beer, and an ale is a top fermented beer. It's very light. It's got a orangey color. It's not pale like the beers that we're used to, and it's got a fresh taste in it. And because it's got no hops added to it, it doesn't have that typical bitter taste or bitterish taste that other styles of beer have. A porter is a slightly malted English style beer. So if you roast the grain a little more, you'll get a slightly darker beer. The darker beer is loved in England and it's drunk at room temperature from in England, which is 12 degrees or 14 degrees centigrade in summer, and a little cooler in the spring. And in winter, of course, it's very, very cold. So it's not warm beer like Indian warm. It's warm beer at 12 or 14 degrees centigrade. Most other beers are drunk at 1 degree centigrade. That's the best way to enjoy a beer is to have 1 degree centigrade. Now, the top of the beer that you see the foam or the froth is called the head of the beer. And the bigger the head on the beer and the more bouncy the head on the beer, not only is it visually appealing, but it imparts a different taste. And we can relate to it from two things that I've seen and all of us have seen. One is stretching your coffee or stretching your tea. That actually aerates it and that gives it a slightly different taste to tea that is brewed and drunk, which is flat. The second is drinking tea from a saucer, which is very common in Mumbai. So we get a tea in a teacup and a saucer, and then we slurp the tea, much like the French drink wine, or the Koreans and Japanese and Chinese eat their noodles. And that also aerates it. So this head of froth that is there on top of the beer not only makes it visually very appealing, like the icing on a cake, but it also imparts a different taste to a beer. And we do comment on it. Sometimes you do comment that this beer is flat. It basically means there are not enough bubbles in it anymore. It's been stored away for too long. So that's a porter. A stout, which is the dark one at the bottom, Guinness is a famous stout, but there are many other stouts as well, is a very, very heavily malted beer. That means the grain has been roasted so much that the malt has come out very, very thick and deep. When you cook grain, the sugars sort of release from the malt. So uh, when you either sprout them or when you cook them, so that's a very, very heavy drink, very rich in calories. And it used to be sustenance for the Irish people for a very long time. It actually gave you the calories that you needed. And even schoolboys were encouraged to drink a pint of stout because it made you healthy and made you big. Otherwise, you were not getting enough of calories. Pilsner, we've used this term. It can be spelled either Pilsener or Pilsner. It's a style of brew which is brewed in Pilsen, which is in Czechoslovakia, Czech Republic. It's obviously got hops in it. Everything except ale has got hops in it. And lagering means storing the beer. So when you add hops, it allows you to store the beer for a longer time because it's a preservative. And lagers are bottom fermented beers which are stored in caves. A lager is a Czech or a German word for cave, and that's how you get that name. Now, what are hops? This is a little picture of hops. It's a medicinal plant actually. It was used for it's still used in some places as a part of a medicine. It preserves the beer a lot longer and it gives that distinctive bitterness to it. And because it was a little bitter, people loved it as medicine, and they thought that the medicine was strong and powerful. And actually, bitter medicine tastes good to patients, so they think that it works better. Let's come to wine. And here, we have to use some clever words, because wine is something that you drink at a soiree and you have a little bit of cheese and some stuff. You're hanging around, and the color of the wine. So let me tell you a bit. There's a lot to know, but I'm just going to go, superficially to make it entertaining. They're red wines and white wines. I'll tell you a little bit of pink, though I've not written a slide on it. Red wines, these are the three big ones. Cabernet Sauvignon, that's how somebody pronounces it, but you could pronounce it anyway. It's a very dark, beautiful wine, which comes from that particular grape. Now, why were grapes made into wine? Unfortunately, the soil of France and Spain was where wines were first made. The soil there is not so conducive to producing sweet grapes. The grapes are very astringent and dry. They suck away the saliva and they don't taste good. So they tried to do something else with the grape. And then, of course, it became a culture in France more, in Italy a little bit, in other European countries as well. And Cabernet Sauvignon is a big red grape. So red wines are made with red grapes along with the skin. Those of you who've had pink wines, they're made with red grapes without the skin. So red wine plus skin is a big red wine, and Cabernet Sauvignon is one of the best. You have to say something clever when you've got a glass of Cabernet Sauvignon in your hand. Wines are aged, and you can say, different things like this wine was meant to be aged. The flavors you'll get out of it will be currants or chocolate. If somebody asks you, what are the aroma, what is the bouquet? It's currants, chocolate, mint, toast. It's dark, it's very powerful, and the aftertaste is very long, or the finish, as they call it. So if you drink it, it remains with you for a very, very long time. Because it's a big red wine, it goes with big red meaty food. So if you love meats and you love your meats, sort of the taste which Japanese call umami, which is very proteiny and very meaty and oily all mixed together, then a Cabernet Sauvignon is ideal. It doesn't go well with peanuts and sort of more superficial food. The second is a Merlot. This is another red wine, which is a little sort of comparator of Cabernet Sauvignon. The clever thing to say when you have a glass of Merlot in your hand is always distinctly Merlot, because it has got a taste which no other red wine will have. You will, if you taste it a little bit, you will, and there's a method of tasting wines which I'll not go into here, but perhaps some other time. So, wine tasting, what we eat with wine, etc. And it's a softer wine. It's not as heavy as Cabernet Sauvignon. It's softer, fruitier, friendlier, which basically means you can drink a little more of it. It's not that heavy. The finish is not that long. It doesn't stay in your mouth that long. And the taste you'll get is rose petals, blackberry, a little bit like strawberry jam. So it's a friendlier wine. If the day is good, it's meant for a daytime wine drinking, whereas Cabernet Sauvignon will be more an evening night wine. And the third is a Pinot Noir. It's a naughty grape actually. So either you can have a fantastic Pinot Noir or you can have a terrible one. And in the next slide, I'll tell you one clever thing to say about all wines. That was a good year. You'll hear it. So when is this wine from? Oh, it's 1991. That was a good year. It basically refers to Pinot Noir and one type of white wine which will come later, because it's a very complicated little teenager. Um, it's not aged as much as Cabernet Sauvignon, which does well with aging. It matures well, and it's a complex wine. If you get a bad Pinot Noir, you're not going to enjoy your food. The taste you'll get out of it are cherry, cranberry. It's a little earthy taste. It's not as light as a Merlot, but it's an earthy taste. And there's certain kinds of mushrooms which grow underground, which are truffle mushrooms. It tastes a bit of that. You can get them in some parts of Goa, where I've had them, and it tastes like the center of a fruit. It doesn't taste like the periphery of the fruit. As you go closer and closer to the center, you'll get a little bitterness to the fruit. particularly in an apple and a peach, where you get that little bitter taste. So it tastes like the true core of one of those fruits, and it's a beautiful wine if you get a good bottle. And all red wines generally go well with red meat. Most white wines generally go with white meat. The exceptions you can make in a red wine, because the meat is a little more flavorful, is a chicken leg. But otherwise, red meats are good. That was a good year. That's a nice thing to say about the first white wine as well as the Pinot Noir, which is Chardonnay. It's a great white grape. It's the best known white grape of Burgundy. Burgundy is known for red wines, actually. The color burgundy is also denotes what a red wine should look like. But the Chardonnay is the best known white grape of Burgundy. And it's got a beautiful, oily, buttery vanilla taste in it. And you love it if it's coupled with very nice white fish. It's very rich, it's very intense. It's the white comparator to a Cabernet Sauvignon. The Sauvignon Blanc, which is basically a cousin brother of the Sauvignon Cabernet, but the white colored Sauvignon. It's a young one. It's fresh and lively. It's also called Fume Blanc. It tastes more of the grass, figs. It's a bit spicy. You'll get cardamom and cinnamon sort of flavors in it. Now, why do all these flavors come when you age a wine or age any alcohol? It's basically the wood that imparts these congeners inside, and I'll come to that when I do whiskey. But the flavor of the wood, the tannins in the wood, and the vanilla in the wood actually comes out, and it gives all these flavors. And from Germany, you've got a grape called Riesling. It's much colder in Germany that's in France. The harvests are late and the fruits are left longer, so they are often a little overripe. And it's a white wine which is very, very sweet. It's very fruity. It's the best wine for Indian palates. Indians like sweet stuff. We don't like a dry wine. So a dry wine is one which is astringent, which sucks away the saliva. But you can learn to enjoy a dry wine if you combine it in a particular way. So if you have a sip of dry wine and it sucks away all the saliva, and then you have something oily or buttery, a little piece of bread dipped in olive oil and eat it, you'll find that the saliva just pours out of your salivary glands and explodes in your mouth. And that kind of flavor is fantastic. That combination of flavors. So Riesling is a beautiful sweet white wine. It's very light, and it suits the Indian palate. And most Indian wines would actually be more Riesling type, though they are, of course, you get Sauvignon Blanc from India as well. It grows well, but the problem is that the soil in India is very rich. It's not chalky, drier soil that is there in France and Spain. So, because our rich soil, Nasik area in India, which grows grapes, because of our rich soil, our grapes are generally sweet anyway. You can eat them also, and you can make them into wine also. So, they're that type of grape. There is one wine that we must know of. It's champagne. It's the sort of prince of wines or the king of wines. The word for dry is brut. If you see a bottle of champagne with extra brut written on it, it's bone dry. It's got 0.6% sugar in it. We won't enjoy it. It's not for Indian tastes. Western palates, maybe Chinese, Japanese, they love it, and it's the sort of ceremony of opening a bottle of champagne which is more important. The opposite of extra brut is Deux, which is sweet, which has got 5% sugar. So if you see Dukes on your bottle of champagne, it is something that you will enjoy. Generally speaking, if you're more than 4 or 5 people, you should get a Magnum, which is 2 bottle size. It's a big bottle of champagne. And legend has it that's actually Marie Antoinette, whose sort of painting is on top. A champagne glass derives its shape. If you see what a champagne glass looks like, it derives its shape from a mold that was made of Marie Antoinette's breasts. So Marie Antoinette was the wife of King Louis XVI. She was beheaded at the guillotine during the French Revolution. Her last words, as she stepped on the executioner's toes by mistake, she said, "I'm sorry, monsieur, please forgive me." And then, of course, laid her head down on the guillotine and her head was chopped off. but we owe the champagne glass to her physique. Spirits, now these are the bad boys of booze. They sort of, it's a small step from brewing alcohol, which is beer and wine, which is basically using yeast. Now it's cultured yeast, but it was sort of natural yeast. And you need a source of heat. You need to evaporate the alcohol in a closed receptacle, which is called a still. Distilling still is the closed receptacle, and some tubing to allow the evaporated alcohol to sort of filter down. So that's called distilling. The old style of distilling was a big copper pot, which is called the pot still. Today, people want distilling 24 hours a day, so it's continuous still. The problem with distilling alcohol and drinking fresh distilled alcohol is you can get blind drunk. That's not a term that is to be used lightly, because when you distill alcohol from an alcohol potent mixture brew, you will get many types of alcohol in it. Not only ethanol, but you get some methanol and you get some higher alcohols in it, uh, propyl alcohol, etc. Small quantities, and it's the methanol in it which actually goes straight into your retina and blocks the retinal arteries and kills it. And that's why you hear of people who've had stuff that is illegally brewed or illicitly brewed and distilled at distilleries, getting blind, and that's one of the side effects. So modern sort of alcohol producers have learned the technique of distilling and removing all the harmful alcohols, which are small in percentage, but removing them and keeping only the alcohol which is sort of suitable for the body to stay back. A word about wood. All alcohol has to be aged before it is sold commercially. It has to be aged for 3 years. That's a law all over the world. Whatever alcohol you get in India, most of the whiskeys that come are actually made out of sugarcane molasses. They're just colored with a little bit of color which comes from the sugar itself, cooked sugar. But otherwise, basically, the alcohol is sugarcane based alcohol in India. But otherwise, outside it is barley based mixed with some grain. A person who makes an oak barrel is called a cooper. And below is a little photograph of a football stadium in Mumbai called the Cooperage. And it's called the Cooperage because the barrels were actually made in that place in a building long before. And then that cooperage was destroyed and it was made into a football field. But it's still known as the cooperage. So what does aging whiskey do or aging alcohol do? Some alcohols are not aged, but this is. So two processes. One is distilling. Most of them are double distilled to remove all the bad sort of alcohols, and aging for at least 3 years. Wood removes the harsher elements of alcohol, and the wood that is used is oak. You can't use any other wood. Most of the oak today comes from Americas, either Canada or America. Whether you distill it in India or whether you age it in Europe, it removes the harsher elements. That is, it leaches out all the stuff that makes you sick and puts in stuff called congeners. So vodka has the least amount of congeners, only 50 micrograms, whereas complex whiskeys have 6,000, 8,000, 10,000, which is what gives them the taste and which is what gives them the color. Bourbon is aged in barrels that are cooked on the inside. They look like alligator skin. They're charred, and that gives it a vanilla flavor. And congener is what is the stuff that is added by wood once you age. So all Scotch whiskey is aged in a bourbon barrel that has been used once. So bourbon, that is American whiskey from the county Bourbon in Kentucky, the state, uh, by law, you can just age it once. After that, that barrel has to be discarded. So it's shipped across to Scotland, which suits both very well. And Scotland gets a used barrel, and all Scotch whiskey is distilled in used bourbon barrels. There are many great whiskey producing nations across the country. The bottom right hand picture is the original inhabitants of Taiwan. They're called the Kavalan people. And one of the best whiskeys, which is consistently rated as one of the top whiskeys in the world for the last 5 years, is a brand called the Kavalan whiskey. I don't speak for them, so I'm just mentioning it. The Taiwanese are also big whiskey producing nation. Irish and Americans spell whiskey with an E. They've got more to it. They say they've got more to it, including spelling. The oldest distillery in the world is in Northern Ireland, close to Belfast. It's called the Old Bushmills Distillery, and you will still get Bushmills whiskey if you look for it. It's available in most stores. It is triple distilled. All other whiskies in the world are double distilled. So Bushmills is distilled 3 times, which means there are no harsh elements at all, and it's very, 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 very smooth. The bottom left picture is the charred inside of a bourbon cask. That's how they char it, so that it becomes like cracked alligator hide, and that imparts a vanilla-like flavor in bourbon. Bourbon cannot, just like champagne, you have to make it in the Champagne district of France. All other white wines that have got bubbles in it are called fizzy wines or aerated wines or bubbly wines. But champagne comes only from it's they've got a sort of trademark on it. So bourbon also has a trademark. It only comes from the county Bourbon, Bourbon County in Kentucky. All other American whiskies are called whiskies. For example, Tennessee whiskey is a whiskey. And to give you some names, Maker's Mark is a bourbon, and Jack Daniels is a Tennessee whiskey. So these are the two sort of, when you take a Jack Daniels, it's not bourbon, it's a Tennessee whiskey, and it will be spelled whiskey with an E in it. By law, whiskey must be aged for at least 3 years. So you'll not get any whiskey in the world that is fresh. Otherwise, it's hooch. If you're getting something which is fresh and somebody tells you it's whiskey, it's hooch, and it can't be colored unless they've added some caramel in it, which is fake or artificial coloring. That is Bourbon County actually, which you see there. So what are these terms? Single malt. A single malt is a malt whiskey from a single distillery, and they're good examples. All of you know Glenlivet, Glenmorangie. Glenmorangie, though technically is not a single malt, it's a vatted malt. I'll come to that. But Glenlivet and many other whiskies, there are 4 big whiskey producing regions in Scotland. Is the Highlands, the Lowlands, the Islay, and the Glaswegian whiskey, which is a separate, completely separate whiskey. The second is if a malt whiskey. Sorry, I'll go back to single malt. So single malt is a blend of several malt whiskies from a single distillery. There's no grain whiskey in it at all. It's only made out of barley. There's nothing in it. It's malted barley, which is made into alcohol, which is whiskey from it, as opposed to blends. I'll tell you a little later. A vatted malt, and for those of you who remember Green Label, Johnny Walker Green Label is a vatted malt. Glenmorangie also comes in that category. They take malt whiskies from several distilleries and bottle it and sell it to you. But it's still only barley whiskey. There's no grain whiskey in it. Blended whiskies, Johnny Walker, Chivas Regal, these are, or Grants, these are blended whiskey. They've got some amount of malt whiskey in it, and they've got some amount of whiskey made out of regular grain. That regular grain could be anything. It could be rice, it could be wheat, it could be corn, it could be anything. Bourbon is corn, a little bit, 50% corn. So these are blended whiskies. And the master blenders have got a formula in their mind. So Green Label is not available anymore. Gold Label is not available anymore because that the constituents to make it are not there. And the reason why whiskies are blended as opposed to malts, and you can well imagine. So different harvests of malt over the years may produce a different taste in a malt whiskey from the same distillery. For example, a Glenlivet may taste different if you bought it this year as compared to a Glenlivet of a similar age that you got 10 years ago. But a blended whiskey will have a standard taste. Black Label will taste like Black Label. Red Label will taste like Red Label. Chivas will taste like Chivas. A second note about the number of years. So when they say Black Label 12 years, 12 years is the youngest whiskey in the mix. So there will be some complex, little bit of 40-year-old whiskeys and 50-year-old whiskeys also in that Black Label. It's in the formula that the master blender has in their mind. But the youngest in that is 12 years. So it's not a 12-year-old whiskey. It's a blend of malt whiskies, the youngest of which is 12 years old. And it has been blended to give a standard taste with some regular alcohol made from grain whiskies, of course, which is double distilled as well. Malt is malted barley, that is barley that's allowed to sprout. You put some water in it and don't make it rot, but just spread it around, and then you can dry it in the sunshine. Scotland and Ireland don't have that much sunshine, so they dry it over a fire. And if the fire is coming from immature coal, which is called peat, then that peaty smoke gets into it, and you'll get a whiskey that's peaty. If it's very heavily peaty, it's also called a smoky whiskey. In India, the grain whiskey is not made. There's some specialized whiskeys which are, but the general alcohol that is used in India, of course, is blended with good whiskeys will have some malt in it as well. But the alcohol that comes is sugarcane, and it's colored with sugar that has been caramelized. Bourbon, of course, comes from Bourbon County. Now, how do you appreciate a whiskey? Um, like I said, the age on the bottle is the age of the youngest whiskey in the mix. There are three big types of whiskey that you will find. One is a thick whiskey. Blue Label is a thick, big whiskey. It's oily, meaty. Why is that? Because there are a lot of esters in it, which are oil based. It's oily, meaty, nutty, waxy, and all you require is a few drops of water to release the esters. In fact, we should use a dropper for that, because you just want to release the esters. If you turn the glass on the side a little bit, you'll see that the oil stains. It's a heavy, thick whiskey. You'll love it if you have it with thick, oily foods. So, greasy, oily foods go very well with thick whiskeys. Thin whiskeys are whiskeys which are clean, fruity, green. They're a bit of grassy, sour, sweet, and they're best if you have it with soda or water. And they also go very well with cocktails. And these are superb with finger buffet foods. The light kind of food you have in an evening. You're meeting after a long time. You have a little bit of foods. Complex whiskeys are those which are matured on smoke or peat, and they've got a heavy perfume, metallic, leathery, spicy, peaty, or smoky flavor. They can also feel musty. And this is best if it's had cold, which is in the freezer, neat, but if it's cold, or on the rocks. And if you have a supreme whiskey, that's the bottom right hand image. If you have a one of the best whiskeys that you can lay your hands on, then it's best to have them in a style called a flight of whiskeys, which is you've got a little board with little holes on it, and you put little cocktail glasses in them and fill up 15 ml in each, and you have them one after another, and they go very well with because they're complex whiskeys. They'll go very well with complex foods or complex finger foods that go along with. Let me come to rum. The name rum comes from sugarcane. The botanical name of sugarcane is Saccharum saccharum, and that's where it came from. Originally invented in the West Indies, and it was something that the pirates loved. It was also called Kill Devil, Rot Gut, Chief Puddling. It's well known as an army drink, and it's very well known as a college drink. So affordable, good quality, and it's excellent with thumbs up, Pepsi, Coca-Cola, rum and Coke. In England, it's called Old Grog. Now, tradition has it that the navy and all navies of the world had a rum, uh, a rum tote, or a rum allowance every day. They were called rum issues. All navies in the world stopped rum. That every man on the ship got a rum issue every day to keep them away from boredom, basically. And Winston Churchill, who was the Lord of the Admiralty, he's a Navy guy actually. He said the Navy tradition in Britain was rum, sodomy, and the lash. That's a picture of somebody with the lash, wearing the lash, because they were punished very heavily since they were in a closed, confined space, miles and miles away from land. Daily rum issues to the naval staff stopped all over the world in 1970. Nobody gets rum anymore. You're supposed to get it when you're on port. There are many beautiful rum-related cocktails you can have. Planter's Punch is the best known one, but there's some sort of famous ones that you can try. Cider, I've not gone into. It's a drink which is made out of apple. Is neither a beer nor a wine. It's somewhere in between. So Blackstrap is rum plus vinegar, which some people love really. They say the taste goes well. Applejack is rum and cider, very popular in America and Canada. And Flip is hot rum and beer and molasses if you can get your hand on it. But by and large, the favorite in India is rum and coke. Any kind of coke and rum and lots of ice on it is a real favorite among most people in India, particularly in the cold weather. let me a bit of there's a Russian saying called tea is not like vodka, which you can drink a lot of. Can't drink that much tea. The main attraction of vodka is its neutrality. It has no flavor, and it really goes very well with any cocktail because of its neutrality. However, Ukrainian vodka is a bit different. It's also called gorilka, which basically in Ukrainian language means up in flames. It's very fiery, obviously. It's not sort of tempered in any way. The original vodkas were made out of the plentiful crop that was there, which is potato skin. But now you get vodkas made out of grain. They call themselves vodka traditionally, but they're not vodkas. Grain, grape. Um, you can make neutral. It's called a neutral drink, neutral distill or neutral alcohol or whatever. That should be the correct name. And sadly now with these very heavy, strong vodkas, which are 70% plus alcohol proof, you find vodka sniffing has come into its own. Um, I don't know why something. Yeah, okay. I don't know whether it will come later, but perhaps it will come later. Gin. It's actually a Dutch gin, a Dutch drink. In Dutch, in Holland, it's called Jenever, which means juniper. They're berries which are medicinal berries, also called botanicals. The alcohol is brewed through it. These botanicals actually take away the harsher elements, so you don't need to age gin at all. Gin and tonic used to be a common drink among army officers in India, British army officers, because the tonic was made out of quinine, the bark of of quinine. So you had some anti-malarial effect on it. Gimlet is a favorite drink which is made with gin and lemonade and a little bit of lime and sugar added to it. And because it was a Dutch drink, Dutch soldiers never went to fight without having plenty of gin in them. It is also called Dutch courage. If you remember the film My Fair Lady, Eliza Doolittle, the little flower seller, used to speak of a mother and say gin was mother's milk to her. They drank a lot of gin. Actually, England had a Dutch king called William of Orange who came over in 1692 and took over his father-in-law's throne. And he brought with him gin. And England was awash with gin right up until the time of Queen Victoria, who loved everything Scottish. And whiskey became an English drink only after Queen Victoria came to the throne because she was so enamored with Scotland. She lived there most of the time, and she actually brought whiskey back from Scotland to England. Otherwise, England was mainly a gin drinking country for a long time. Brandy is also called brandy wine, which basically means burnt wine. It was a distillate made out of the finest wines. There's a saying for those who drink brandy: beer is for boys, wine is for men, but he who aspires to be a hero must drink brandy. The full aroma of brandy. If you really want to enjoy a glass of brandy, you must have a balloon shaped glass as a scene, and you must caress the glass for about 5 minutes. Now, why must you do that? Because 36 degrees centigrade of your arm, of your hand, will release the big aromas, the first big aromas of the brandy. If you drink brandy in any other glass, those aromas will not be captured and not be funneled into a narrow opening. And if you don't warm or caress the glass with your hand, you'll not be able to stimulate those aromas to come out. And you must swirl the glass around. And then just bring it close to the nose. Don't stick your nose in it initially. Because you want the big bouquet, the big fragrance to come out, the big non complex. And after you've got that and you've seen the color of the brandy swishing around, then you can stick your nose into the glass. The opening of the glass is just about big enough for our nose to go in. And you'll get the subtler fragrance, subtler aromas coming out. And only then can you have a sip of the brandy. So, how do you know you had a good brandy? The tips of your earlobes will get warm as soon as you have one sip. I don't know why that happens. But if you have one sip and your earlobes become warm, that brandy is great. There are many types of brandy. Of course, the two big brandies of France are Cognac and Armagnac. They both come from different regions in France. And you cannot make a brandy and call it Cognac unless it comes from the Cognac region. Most people describe Cognacs as thunder plus lightning and Armagnacs as death plus hell plus the grave plus alcohol for both. Whatever's left over of the grapes, that is the grape skin, which is the bottom image, is also made into alcohol. It's called pomace. It's horrible. If you have it, it's like industrial fluid. You will never like it. It's got no color to it. It's dried grape skin, and whatever has to be squeezed out of it is squeezed out. And the fermentation process is what actually drives the alcohol out. It's not the real stuff that is inside which is coming out. If you see something that has Napoleon brandy on it, it means there are a mix of brandies in that, some of which have been stored from the time of the Emperor Napoleon. So they're 200 years old, and they're very good. They're generally called digestives, which means you have some drinks which are aperitifs, which you drink before you have a big meal, and some drinks which are digestive, which are liqueurs and brandies, which you enjoy after a meal to settle stuff down. But of course, if you had too much to drink in between, then it's neither an aperitif nor is it a digestive. You'll find brandies with BS very special, VSOP very special, old pale, and XO extremely old. XO is the best type of brandy. VSOP is the standard brandy that you have every day, and BS is a regular brandy. So if you want to really enjoy your brandy, and incidentally, brandy and cigar don't go well because cigar is also New World Caribbean and American tobacco. It goes better with rum, actually. But because of Churchill, everybody thinks that brandy and cigar go very well. Tequila is another big sort of spirit. It's made from the heart of a cactus plant called the agave. And legend has it that long time ago, in the Native American legend, a bolt of lightning actually cooked the agave, and then because the rain, it sort of got a natural yeast and became alcohol. So there are two types. One is called mezcal, where the root or the core is roasted and then alcohol is made out of it. It's very starchy. And tequila is made out of the steamed agave. It was never famous. Never famous. Nobody had tequila. It's become famous after the margarita. And now, of course, people have that salt on their hand and lime and tequila shot, and then you suck the lime and then you have the or lick the salt. I don't know, whatever combination. But it was the margarita which actually made tequila famous. Otherwise, tequila was, sort of down market kind of alcohol which came from Mexico and Central America. The most deadly of all alcohols, which is 75% plus alcohol. Most alcohols are 35 to 42%, unless they're cask specials, where the distiller is inviting you to dilute it at your pleasure. It's not meant to be at 65%. It's meant to be diluted a little more. Absinthe, the favorite of the great artist Van Gogh, and you'll find most of his paintings have got this rich ochre yellow in it because he was continuously in that hallucinated stage. Because it has got wormwood, which is known as nagadon in India. It's a strong hallucinogen. That's the plant there. And you go through several stages when you drink absinthe. First is ordinary drinking. You just get that same stuff, euphoria and depression. After some time, you'll start seeing monstrous and cruel visions. You actually start hallucinating. But if you persist and persevere, after that, according to Van Gogh, you will see what you want to see. Wonderful and curious things. And that's what got him to do the paintings that he did. You can see them on the net, and they're beautiful, really. They're majestic, magnificent paintings. Incidentally, it's such a bad drink that the Russian word for absinthe is Chernobyl. So, Chernobyl was where the nuclear disaster happened, the biggest and the worst nuclear disaster ever. And the Russian word for absinthe is actually Chernobyl. And I think that's a photograph of the plant as it was destroyed and caused the greatest nuclear disaster ever known to mankind. Cocktails. Am I running late or am I okay, sir?
Okay, sir, please carry on.
Yeah. So cocktails. Is it the high art of drinking? You'll see everybody flaunting cocktails. Or is it a low farce? I mean, I've never really been able to come to the conclusion. So as far as I'm concerned, no pink ladies, no black Russians. Give them the Singapore sling. So not for me. The word cocktail, many people say it has come from many places, but the French claim it is theirs. Cocktail means a mixture of many wines in French. And Actually, it became popular in America. It's an American sort of version of alcohol. It became popular in America, believe it or not, during the prohibition of the 1920s. You've seen the film Untouchables, Kevin Costner. So there was strict prohibition in America, and the rich people had nothing to do but throw away their bottles of alcohol. So in order to hide it, they went into their big bathrooms with big bathtubs and poured all the alcohol into the bathtub after plugging it. So a mixture of all those alcohols they would have day after, so some vodka, some rum, some American whiskey, some Scotch whiskey, some wine, whatever alcohol they had, they mixed it together, and that became the origin of the first cocktail. And then it became sort of fashionable, and you have bartenders swirling around their glasses and shaking it and flaming it and things like that. Bruce Willis, incidentally, was a bartender. There are many liqueurs used in cocktails. Don't have a cocktail with advocaat in it. It's got egg yolk in it. You'll never like it. No Indian can like it. It's a peculiar sort of Dutch Belgian kind of drink. Amaretto is a South African nut. It's quite tasty. You'll recognize most of the stuff. Curacao, Drambuie, Grand Marnier, Triple Sec. These are all sort of orangey stuff. Tia Maria is very coffee, and Kahlua is very coffee. Cointreau also has got a beautiful flavor to it. So those liqueurs, these liqueurs which are added in cocktails, make it great. But the most famous cocktail in the world, of course, is the martini, as James Bond would often say. Vodka martini, shaken and not stirred. And why shaken? Because when you shake a martini, it leaves small fragments of ice. It makes it like a slurry, actually, which makes the drink colder because more alcohol comes in surface because there's more surface area of the ice in it. And the sensation in the mouth is totally different from one that is stirred. But if you go to a bar and ask a bartender anywhere in the world, including in India, and say that give me a shaken martini, they oh my god, not shaken. So stirred is a traditional way. That is the way you're supposed to have it, because that ice cold sensation takes away from the wine that is used to clean the glass. It's called vermouth, which is a beautiful flavor. And then of course just vodka and crushed ice is added with it. And you can add either a pearl onion, or you can have an olive on it. So both these give you a different sort of taste. Uh, it's not a great drink. I mean, I don't think it's an Indian kind of drink, and Indians don't love it. We prefer a little sweetish. This is again very dry. So if you're dry martini, it's pretty sort of astringent on the mouth. Now, I've heard this, a small one for the road, many times. If you drink, don't drive. And if you're a golfer, don't even putt. Uh, I tell you, in 15 minutes, your breath alcohol, which is 2,500 times more sensitive than your blood alcohol, and your blood alcohol are both positive. You can't fool a policeman, and you can't fool a breathalyzer. You can't. If you're looking a bit dangerous when you're driving, somebody will catch you and make you drink a breath of it. And like I said, if you drunk 30 cc and you're driving away in less than an hour, you're not sort of processed all the 20 milligrams that are there in that. And the sad reality in statistics is if you have 60 cc, you've got a 50% chance of having a greater risk at accidents. 120 cc, which is two large drinks, 100% greater risk. 180 cc, three large pegs, 4 times greater risk of an accident. 240 cc, 7 times greater risk. And 250 cc, which is nearly half a bottle, 25 times greater risk. Incidentally, using a cell phone to speak when driving is equivalent to 180 cc of alcohol, and using a cell phone to text while driving is equal to 240 cc of alcohol. So as bad as drinking that is using your cell phone while speaking and using your cell phone to text, which I've seen many people do, and sadly I've seen some people on the motorcycle do as urine contains 1.3 times more alcohol than in the blood. The legal limit in India is 0.03 blood alcohol concentration, which is little less than one drink if you set forth in less than 1 hour after having one drink. So in the US and in Europe, it's 0.08 blood alcohol concentration. In India, it's very, very strict. It's 0.03, which is nearly 3 times lower than what it is there above it. I've heard this also many often. I can handle it. Don't worry, I can handle it. I'll manage it. You can't handle. You can fool people from your demeanor, but you can't fool people from the effects it has on your body. And like I often say, it takes just one drink to get me drunk. But the problem is I can't remember whether it's the fifth or the sixth drink. So having drinks too fast, having drinks that are not sort of matured, that are not distilled properly, will get you blind drunk. You'll become blind actually. It causes testicle. We know all this. Testicular atrophy, shrinkage in the penile size, gynecomastia. It's basically liver failure, which is, swinging in at that level, plummeting sperm count. And in females, just the opposite happens, androgenizing characteristics in the female. And I can tell you, if you answer these questions, you'll know whether you have a drink problem or not. On the bottle, it says 13 pegs. That is 750 cc. You're supposed to get 13 pegs, but you get only 5 pegs out of the bottle. It's empty at the end of 5 pegs. You're having too much. If you're looking for empties around the house, that tells a story. And if you're catching all those drops of empties and making a little drink out of vodka, rum, gin, beer, then that's a big, big problem. You can't remember what you're drinking if you go to a bar and you say any drink. Somebody asks you what do you have. You can't remember whether it was whiskey or not. Any drink. If people are annoyed or criticizing your drinking, particularly people at home or your workplace, if you yourself are feeling guilty about drinking, and if you're drinking, if you need a drink first thing in the morning, these are sort of giveaway signs, and you need help really at that point in time. Uh, I know people who try to fool themselves, but it doesn't work in the long run. But it is good for you. There are many studies which have come out which are trying to criticize this. I don't know why, because there is a big brigade which wants to prevent people from enjoying a good drink. But it does have a protective effect on the heart. And how much is that? 60 cc of spirits a day. That's good. That's good for you. And I have enough of evidence on it. That's equal to 2 half glasses of wine, or it's equal to 1 pint, maybe 1.5 small bottles of beer, or 2 bottles of beer. It reduces the likelihood of strokes. And this is a huge study that was conducted in Europe, published in Scandinavia. Surprisingly, it reduces the onset of late onset diabetes. So people who start, not the type of sort of hidden drinking, but ambivalent, like cultures like Spain and France, where having a glass of wine or 2 glasses of wine at lunch during work is not really a problem. It reduces the onset. Among Europeans, France has got the lowest incidence of late onset diabetes. It also cuts the risk of gallbladder problems, particularly cancer of the gallbladder, not gallstones. And it boosts cognitive functioning in the elderly. It's not only the drink, it's the socializing that goes with it. I think probably if you're drinking alone, then that's a problem which I should have added in the previous slide. There's some high risk jobs, and sadly, doctors are in that list. Hotels and catering, where access to alcohol is plenty. The shipping industry, particularly those who are on a ship, it's dead boring. It's dead boring. You're doing nothing for weeks on end, and most of them turn out to have a drinking problem. The armed forces, machismo, to show that you're tough, and that is in truck drivers as well. Because when you're with your mates and you want to show that you're tough, you want to show that you can drive even after having 5 drinks or drinking a bottle of whatever the local alcohol is. Any job that requires a lot of socializing, journalists that need to get stuff out of people. Sadly, many senior business people, they think that drinking is good, socializing is good. It helps build business contacts. It helps, increase your business. I'm sure it does up to a certain point, but I think doing it on a daily basis or overdoing it is probably not good. Let's face it, people drink, but don't worry. Moralists, doctors, that's our profession, the government, and comedians who make fun of people who drink never let any serious drinker out of their sights for too long. So drinkers will be under scrutiny from several different disparate people. And for most people in the world, except very, very sort of puritanical societies, alcohol does punctuate life right from the cradle up to the grave. But let's not do anything to make them too close to each other any more than it needs to be. It does help you. And if it does help you in moderation, It's fantastic. And finally, I want to say this Irish poem: to your good health. I drink to your health when I'm with you. I drink to your health when I'm alone. I drink to your health so often that I'm starting to worry about my own. So thank you very much. I mean, this is very open. You can make comments. There's no need of any questions. And if you like this, then I have a very, very detailed version of just each one of those drinks, which is whiskey and rum, uh, aging process, and all the different things. So I'll pause here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. It was a wonderful talk. It was an insightful and impactful talk about alcohol. And I believe that your talk has undoubtedly brought about meaningful reflection among the audience. And I'm certain that it will have a lasting impact on those who had the privilege of hearing it. Thank you, sir. And I invite our secretary, Madhumurali, to continue with the discussion. Madhumurali, please go ahead.
Yeah, am I audible, sir? Thank you for inviting me to this discussion. Shastri said it was a great presentation, but people who know me would know that I may not be the right person to be initiating the discussion on this particular topic. But because I find so many veterans in this field sitting among the audience, so is Jimmy over there? Jimmy was sitting there.
No. I mean, any comment. It doesn't have to be it's not it's a fun topic.
Yeah, your talk had two parts. The first part probably was a bit of theoretical part, which came first, or what is the evolution of alcohol. And the second part probably was the impact of alcohol. Probably the last part was an advisory kind of thing on 3-4 slides to spend an advisory, putting the doctors in the high risk category and requesting not to drive after drinking and what are the complications or consequences. So it are all the components of education, warning signs, everything. So. Srijay sir, anybody, Santosh sir, you would want something or something. I thought you would take a rest after the ASECON 2023. All had a very exciting week last Saturday, Sunday. We came back from that. So, anybody with a question or suggestion or any add-on points to what Shastri sir has already mentioned, please, sir.
Yeah, is that question for me or it's to everyone?
Yeah. All the chat box questions are for you.
Okay.
What is your favorite drink? That is a question.
Yeah, I think it depends on my mood and the season. So I don't like wines and I don't like beers. I find the general sort of atmosphere, India is too hot for it. If you chill your room with an air conditioner, then one of my favorite drink would be a black label with water and lots of ice. I think that's a standard drink, and it's really not for nothing that it's the most favorite whiskey in the world. I don't like cocktails either.
Yes. Rajan sir, you want to ask something? Anybody would like to ask a question?
No, there are no. What questions can anybody?
No question.
If anybody has recorded,
there is one more question in the chat box.
Too many bottles opened.
I just have a question myself. If Srijan sir and Santosh sir, if you've recorded it, could you send me the recording on my email ID so that I can?
I do have the recording. I will have to translate that and send it across to you.
The live, the video recording also is fine.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it could not be streamlined to live because of some issue regarding.
That's okay. Then it's
I will
okay.
post it on the website. On the Facebook later on.
Right. Thank you, sir.
Shastri, Churchill was asked regarding the longevity of his life. And he said, I am well preserved in spirit.
Yeah. So there's a beautiful poem on that as well. But perhaps I'll write it and send it across to Srijan sir, and he can share it with all of you. There's no doubt. I think the alcohol protein malnutrition, when it is substituting, your money is being substituted in alcohol rather than for protein energy malnutrition, as we used to remember it, is more deleterious. So the hard drinking countries, Scotland, Germany, they don't have as many problems as the countries which are poor, which are using their money to buy alcohol. But in moderation, nothing is bad. In fact, the Andhra Medical College's motto at Vizag is, I'm not from there, but I've visited many times, is ne quid nimis, nothing in excess, which I think is fantastic, really.
Srijan sir, you want to make a comment or?
No, there are a lot of.
No, it's okay. I mean, what do you comment? I mean, I'm glad people attended it, and I'm glad that you have a section where there's non-surgical discussion or
Yeah.
non-surgical talk, which is a little different and light-hearted. And
Dr. Sastri, this is Dr. Iqbal.
yes, sir.
There is a concept that when you say moderation, there is a concept that is called slippery slope. So we may situation of drinking more. So that we have to be very careful.
Yeah, that's
Everything
true.
in moderation is a good advice, but this slippery slope we should always remember. And we have seen several people having gone through this slippery slope.
Yeah, that's
and
true.
ended their career, professional life very badly.
Yeah. So I don't want to comment on it because it's a personal choice. But I mean, I think what you feel good for you, you should do, and for your family, because you don't live alone. Right, sir? Should we call it a night?
Yep.
Srijan sir, if there are
Yeah.
no more.
Actually, I thought we are going to have long discussions or comments from others, but the comments were less, maybe because it is 10:30. That may be the reason. Anyway, thank you very much, Shastri sir, for the official vote of thanks. I invite the Secretary of our Association of Surgeons of Kerala chapter, Dr. Madhu Murali.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Shastri sir. Again, on behalf of ISI Kerala chapter, I place on record our sincere thanks for coming over on the music's podium. And again, thank you all for joining. Again, after the SECON break, we had a short break during the SECON because the schedule of the SECON was during our last week. So we missed out on one music. So we had doubts that we should restart this week or postpone one more week. But then we thought we'll restart the musings this week itself. As Shastri sir mentioned, it is a non-surgical forum where we discuss things like what we had discussed today. So we are in the 23rd edition. So we'll continue it for all Wednesday 9 p.m. We have this program. So again, I request all of you to watch out for future announcements regarding musics next week. So thank you again. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you, sir.
Right.
Thank you.